Hi, to learn about the pulley, let's start with this funny little story.
The pail, the pail of water that Jack and Jill had to fetch was not on top of the hill at all. It was actually at the bottom of a well. Unfortunately, it was too heavy for either of them to pull up. What they needed was a simple machine to give them a mechanical advantage. No, the inclined plane doesn't help, nor does the lever, nor the screw. What other sorts of machine are there? Ah, yes, the wheel. But what's Jill doing with it? She is arranging the wheel so that it will revolve on an axle stuck in that post. Very good. Jill's just rediscovered another sort of simple machine. A wheel that instead of being all of a piece with its axle, can revolve freely around an axle. Since this type of wheel is used mainly for pulling things, it's called a pulley. And Jill can hitch the rope around it and use it to pull. No, Jack can use it to try to pull the pail of water up. That's funny. He needs just as much force to try to pull the pail of water up this way as he did trying to pull it up the other way. I wonder if there's a better way of rigging the pulley. Amazing. How did Jill manage it? Both she and Jack only had one pulley to work with, and yet Jill was able to pull up the pail with half the force that Jack needed. Well, when a pulley is set up like this, it's called a single fixed pulley. All it does is change the direction of your pull, but it doesn't reduce the force you need. But when a pulley is arranged like this, it's called a single movable pulley, and it halves the force you must exert because the pail of water is now, in effect, being lifted by two ropes instead of one. It's as if two people were lifting the pail, and it looks as if we're getting something for nothing again, doesn't it? But of course we're not. If we compare the distance that Jill raised the pail with the amount of rope she pulled, we see that it's the same old story. What she's gaining on the force, she's losing on the distance. The distance that she pulls the rope is twice the distance that she raises the pail. But the way Jill used the pulley is still twice as effective as the way Jack used it. There are lots of other ways of combining pulleys, and it's simple to figure out the mechanical advantage of each system. All you do is count the number of ropes supporting the weight. This single fixed pulley has one piece of rope supporting a weight of 600 newtons. Input force 600 newtons. Output force 600 newtons. And the mechanical advantage is therefore 1. There isn't any mechanical advantage, in other words. This single movable pulley has two ropes supporting the weight. Input force 300 newtons. Output force 600 newtons. Mechanical advantage 2. Here's a system with 3 supporting ropes. Input force 200 newtons. Output force 600 newtons. Mechanical advantage 3. This one also has a mechanical advantage of 3, and is, in fact, the pulley system that Jill finally rigged up for herself. Although she had to pull the rope 3 meters for every meter that she raised the pail of water, she only needed 200 newtons of force to do it. In a sense, she'd become 3 times as strong as Jack. And now you know why Jack fell down and broke his crown.
So that was a cute little way to introduce today's topic, which is our next simple machine, pulleys. Basically, by definition, a pulley is simply a wheel with a groove in it that has a rope or a chain or a cable running along the groove. And you saw from the video clip there are different types of pulleys. One type is called a fixed pulley. In a fixed pulley, the load, which is here, is at one end, the rope goes around the wheel, and we pull down on the other end. And it's called a fixed pulley because it's fixed here at the top. Here's a second example of a fixed pulley. A rope's wrapped around, you pull down, the load comes up. When it comes to any pulley system, we always want to compare the output force, which is the weight of the load, by how much the input force is, which is how much we're pulling on the rope. So besides number one, fixed pulleys, let's look at the second type of pulley, and then we'll talk more about output versus input force. The second type of pulley that you saw in the cute little Jack and Jill cartoon is movable pulleys. So by definition, a movable pulley is one in which one end of the rope is fixed, but the wheel is free to move up with the load. So here's our fixed rope. It's wrapped now underneath the wheel, and so we usually have to, unfortunately, a bit of a drawback, but we have to pull up on the rope to lift the load up. But besides that drawback, what you notice now in the movable pulley is the rope wrapped under is now supporting the load on two sides. More on that in a minute. So number two, the second type of pulley is a movable pulley. Our third type of pulley is put into a big generic category called block and tackle. Block and tackle basically means multiple or many pulleys together. And so a multiple pulley system is a block and tackle. It could be one fixed and one M movable. Here's our F fixed. Or in this case, we've got one fixed over here. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 movables to help lift the load, which is down here that you can't really see. So three types of systems. Here's another one. Block and tackle, trying to lift up the elephant. Let's talk about, like with levers, the concept of mechanical advantage. Now, in general, if you remember from levers, mechanical advantage had to do with how much output force versus our input force. So the greater the output force and the less we put in, the higher the mechanical advantage. However, with pulley systems, we notice something about the output and input force and how it related to the number of ropes or strings. And so what did we find out? What was the relationship? Well, we found out that the number of strings related to the MA or mechanical advantage that was given in a pulley system. Let's look at that. Here are two pulley systems, grade 8. One is a fixed pulley, and the other is an M for movable pulley. Now here's the weight, which has 100 newtons, and here's the input force, which is our effort, and let's calculate the MA. So according to our formula, the MA is the output divided by the input. So input, and in this case, it is 100 divided by 100, which is 1. So the fixed pulley has an MA of 1, which means you're not really reducing the amount of effort you have to put in. But you are changing the direction of the force to pull down. Now, how many ropes are supporting the load? Just one. So notice, what's the MA? 1. How many ropes? 1. Let's go over to the movable pulley. This time around, we have 100 Newton weight again. And here is how much effort we have to lift. So if we use our formula, MA is output over input, now our output force is 100 newtons from here, but our input was only 50 newtons. So what's the MA? 2. How many ropes are holding up and supporting the load? 2. Let's go to another one. Here's a few pulley systems. It's called a block and tackle. And we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 ropes and a 5th rope going down. But this rope that we're pulling down isn't holding up the load. Now, 1, 2, 3, 4 ropes. Those 4 ropes are supporting the block. And so we would say that the MA of the pulley system would be 4. Again, how do we find this? We count the number of ropes in the pulley system that are helping hold up the load. Don't count a rope if it's not helping hold up. In other words, if we pull down on the rope, chances are it's not holding up the load. So let's say this block was 100 newtons for output. How much would be our input force here where we're pulling? Well, we take the MA and we divide it by the output. So output divided by MA will always give us our input force, which is our effort. So input. And so how much would we be pulling? A measly 25 newtons on the rope. Let's try another one. Here's a block and tackle system. The output force is 200 newtons. We don't know how much for the input right here. How much? We're not sure. We're going to find that out. Let's find the MA. Okay, count the ropes. 1, 2, 3, 4 ropes. So the MA is 4. Next, take the output force, which is 200, and divide it by the MA. And that will give us our input force, the input. So 200 divided by 4. What is 200 divided by 4? Take my calculator out. To figure this out, 200. Come on. Clear. 200 divided by 4 equals 50. I should have been able to do that in my head, hey? So 50 would be the answer. And that is a quick introduction to how pulleys work.